Sarah and I have already submitted our marriage certificate. So, no matter how much you cry and plead, the divorce is finalized. We are officially husband and wife. I had to wait quite a while because you wouldn't agree to separate. Sarah looked at me with an unpleasant expression. Perhaps thinking of the time she had been made to wait. I am kind, so I was thinking about how to leave you without hurting you as much as possible. But then you collapsed, so I had a good reason. Andrew is really kind. But because of that, I had to wait a long time and it made me so angry. Both of them gave me their selfish reasons. We're divorcing because you're useless at both home and work. I'll also claim compensation. There was much I wanted to say. But it was pointless to speak to people who boldly say such unreasonable things. I decided to accept the divorce thinking that. Understood. But 7 days later, Andrew called me crying. My name is Jenny White. I am 27 years old. I work at a real estate company. I got married 2 years ago, and now I live with my husband Andrew. Before that, I lived with my mother. My parents divorced when I was young, and my mother raised me alone. However, my father also paid child support, and my mother was an independent woman. So I never experienced financial hardship. I was also cherished by grandparents from both families. They celebrated events like First Communion, school entrance, and graduation ceremonies. And I can say I grew up without lacking love. Now, my mother lives about a 10-minute walk from our house. I find time between my busy job to have lunch or coffee with her. I also keep in fairly regular contact with my grandparents. I see my father the least often, but he doesn't treat me poorly at all. Rather, he seems to be considerate of my mother. We do keep in touch, and it feels somewhat like he's a father on a business assignment. I grew up without any hardships. But there was always a part of me that was conscious of being a child from a divorced family. And I continued to long for a family where the parents were together. Perhaps because of that, I had a strong desire not to divorce myself. As a result, I ended up in a difficult marriage. Andrew and I started dating because I was in charge. When he came to look for a new house at the branch where I work, my first room was like a dormitory with one bathroom that we all shared. My salary has gone up a bit, and I'd like to live in a slightly better room. After showing him a significant number of properties based on such a request, we found we had similar hobbies and got closer during our talks. Could we exchange contact details? Although it's not ideal to exchange personal contacts with a client, I wanted to talk more. So I ended up giving him my personal account. That led to dating and eventually marriage. The current room you found for me, the lease renewal is coming up. So, I thought why not move into a room we can live in together? Could you find one again? That was Andrew's proposal. We had a small, family-only wedding. I have few relatives, and Andrew's parents are not very social, so it was agreed that was fine. The attendees were my mother, my in-laws, and grandparents from my mother's and Andrew's sides. After reciting our vows in a chapel, we just rented a small restaurant for a meal. A simple wedding ceremony. But I was filled with happiness. My father and his parents said congratulations when I went to inform them of the wedding. And they celebrated with us. They didn't attend the wedding, out of consideration for my mother. It's not that they neglected me. My father and I maintain a good relationship at that distance. That's how our marriage began. The apartment is a 2-room new rental condo. Of course, it's managed by my company, and I searched hard for it. It's not very large, but it's spacious enough for a newlywed couple to start living together. The location is convenient for both our workplaces, and I think we found a pretty good room. You really are a pro, finding such a good room. My first room was like that too, but I really think you're suited to be a real estate agent. Andrew was pleased with the room, and I felt satisfied in both my work and personal life. That's how our married life started out happily. The agreement was to share household chores. But Andrew's work as a salesman often meant he came home late. And since I generally got home on time, I ended up doing most of the housework. Most nights, when he came home late, Andrew was usually drunk. I was forced to drink because of socializing. I'm not that strong a drinker, it's troubling. I understand. But don't overdo it. I know. Sorry for making you worry. Andrew said this and hugged me tightly. It was truly a time like a newlywed. However, about 6 months later, Andrew's behavior began to change. Even though we were still newlyweds, it was as if the honeymoon period had ended. And he began to look down on my work. You're home already? It must be easy working at a real estate reception. Do you even have to work overtime? Our shop has evening hours for customers who can only come at night. So there's hardly any overtime after daytime shifts. Huh, that must be comfortable. Why don't you work at night too? Since it's an easy job, it wouldn't make much difference to work a little longer. I'd be troubled if I had to rely only on my income. Let me clarify that both of us work, and we share the household expenses equally. There is no truth to the claim that I rely solely on Andrew's income. How many hours did you work today? Just moving a bit when someone comes to the store. And you get paid for that. Real estate must be such an easy job. But Andrew's remarks only got worse from there. It's not like that. I communicate with clients, talk to landlords, handle repair requests from tenants, and there are many other things to do. Enough already. No matter what you say, in the end, it's a passive job, isn't it? You don't try to do anything new, do you? Andrew continued to belittle my work. Why would you say such awful things? The Andrew I knew before wasn't like this. Huh, awful? Am I really saying something that bad? I think I'm just stating the obvious. Andrew glared at me and continued. It's wrong to ask me to do household chores when our jobs are so different. Ah. So that's it. I realized Andrew probably felt guilty about leaving all the household responsibilities to me. And that's why he acted this way. Sorry, I just entered a busy period and I've inevitably put a burden on you, Jenny. At first, he used to apologize, but now he acts as if it's natural for me to do everything. Even scattering his laundry on the floor. Could you at least put it in the laundry basket? Stop nagging. If you find it on the floor, just pick it up yourself and put it in the basket. It's something you can do instead of complaining to me. The conversation was getting nowhere. Although it was unpleasant, it's true that Andrew's job was busier, and I had more time. So I silently took on the household chores. I believed that once his work calmed down, he would return to the old Andrew I loved. But there was no sign of him returning to the way he was before our marriage. Perhaps because I silently took on the chores, Andrew became increasingly arrogant. You're not doing much work anyway, right? Then at least keep the house clean. Even though I have more time, I'm still working too. There are places I just can't reach. We started living in this new condo after getting married. And I've tried my best to maintain its newness. But Andrew, like picking at the corners of a box, searches for places I haven't cleaned and gets angry, calling it neglect. If you can't handle the household chores, why don't you just quit your job? That's what he started saying. Frankly, it would be tough to continue living comfortably in our current apartment on just Andrew's income alone. When I showed him the numbers to explain this, Andrew became furious. So you finally said it. You think my salary is low, and you're looking down on me. I couldn't understand what he was accusing me of. Wait, I've never said that. Liar. Ever since we got married and knew each other's salaries. You've been telling me to do the housework. You thought that way because my salary is low. I had misunderstood. I thought Andrew felt sorry because he was busy and couldn't do the household chores. But his real feelings were different. After getting married, it turned out that my salary was higher than his. That fact hurt Andrew's pride. And he felt demeaned because he thought he was being made to do the household chores because his salary was lower. My salary is low anyway. You must feel great knowing you earn more. It's not that much of a difference. But the hours we work are different. So that's it. I understood another thing. Andrew probably feels like he's losing not only in total salary but also in hourly wage. That's why he was so critical about me having almost no overtime. That's not my opinion. I've never looked down on you. But if I made you feel that way, I'm sorry. I wasn't aware of it, but maybe I had hurt Andrew without realizing it. Thinking this, I apologized to Andrew. Good that you understand. Remember, in a marriage, the husband is superior. If you can understand that, you'd better take care of the house properly. I thought it was unreasonable, but since my words calmed Andrew down a bit, I thought it was okay. Coming from a divorced family, I had a strong desire not to do the same. I didn't want to have a falling out with Andrew. I had told him that, so he should understand my feelings. I thought I just needed to endure a little. If we both insisted on our own opinions, it would only hurt us and make our relationship worse. If I could just compromise a little, we could live together without conflict. I thought this would bring our peaceful life back. Andrew would return to the kind person he was before we got married. But that was wishful thinking. Thinking he had subdued me, Andrew became more arrogant. Acting like a king and treating me like a servant. Listen, you just need to do as I say. Don't even think about having your own opinion. Yes, I understand. A person who doesn't want to do anything themselves should just quietly listen to someone who is motivated. Remember, always speak to me with respect. Before I knew it, I couldn't talk back to Andrew at all. I had heard that a frog thrown into hot water will jump out in shock. But if it's placed in water that slowly heats up, it won't notice until it's too late and ends up getting cooked. I was like that frog. Maybe I had been piling on too much without realizing it. One day, I suddenly collapsed at work and was taken to the hospital in an ambulance. 2 weeks after being hospitalized, Andrew came to visit. But as soon as he entered the room, he grinned and said, "You really are useless, aren't you?" Next to him stood a woman I had never seen before. "I'm sorry for becoming like this. I'll try my best to come home as soon as possible. So please forgive me. No need to push yourself. Take all the time you need to recover." Really? Is that okay? I was surprised by his unexpected words. I thought Andrew would surely blame me.
Yeah.
It's fine. Because you and I are going to have nothing to do with each other anymore. What do you mean? Andrew, you're slow on the uptake, aren't you? It means I'm divorcing you and marrying Sarah. Andrew pulled the woman he called Sarah close to him, and she leaned happily against him. Sarah was a woman who appeared much older than Andrew, with flashy makeup. Actually, it's all taken care of. I haven't signed any divorce papers. You're useless and now sick too, you have no value to me anymore. That's why I've filed for divorce. So, he's saying he forged the divorce papers. That can't possibly be legal. Well, it worked. Andrew and the woman smirked and laughed together. And who is this person? Oh, she's my new wife. Nice to meet you, I'm Sarah, Andrew's new wife. Sarah said this with a triumphant look. Sarah and I have already submitted our marriage registration. So, no matter how much you cry and beg, the divorce is final, we are officially married. I had to wait quite a while because you wouldn't agree to separate. Sarah looked at me with an annoyed expression. Perhaps thinking of the time she had been made to wait. Waited? How long are we talking about? Oh, you could not imagine. It's been a year. So they had been in a relationship for a year. You wouldn't understand how precious a year is in the life of a woman in her 30s. And how old are you? I might look younger, but I'm 38. Sarah said proudly, her heavy makeup nearly cracking with her smile. She looked her age, but it seemed wiser not to point that out. I was kind because I was trying to figure out the best way to leave you, without hurting you as much as possible. But then you collapsed, so I had a good reason. Andrew is really kind. But because of that, I had to wait a long time and it made me so angry. Both of them continued to make such selfish remarks to me. Imagine being married to someone who can't handle home or work. And I will be asking for compensation. There was much I wanted to say. But it was pointless to speak to people who boldly say such unreasonable things. I decided to accept the divorce thinking that. Understood. As I said that, the two of them left looking satisfied. You'll see. I muttered to myself and pulled out my smartphone from under the blanket. I had recorded the entire conversation. With this, I should be able to expose Andrew's wrongdoing. When I was hospitalized, it seems I was in a dangerous state in many ways. Continuing to listen to Andrew, I had become unable to think for myself. Watching Andrew's moods, making sure not to upset him. Doing housework to his satisfaction. And working just to keep living, it was all due to exhaustion. Without eating properly or resting, I just kept moving to please Andrew until I suddenly collapsed. I remember being told by a colleague that I looked thinner. But I replied that I was dieting because I thought Andrew would be displeased if he knew someone was worried about me. It started with just a little compromise. But as I gradually conceded more and more ground to Andrew, I found myself backed into a corner without even realizing it. I was really shocked. I thought you were living happily. My mother, who rushed to the hospital, said this with tears in her eyes. I still don't understand what went wrong. It was true. I just wanted to live happily with Andrew. I thought I was just enduring a little bit, but I didn't understand why things turned out this way. And what about Andrew? Why hasn't he said anything after hearing you collapsed? He used to be such a kind person, what happened? I wanted to ask that myself. It was hard to explain everything to my mother in a few words. For now, just rest. We can think about what to do next later. I ended up being hospitalized for a while. Maybe because I was resting both mentally and physically, the fog in my mind started to clear. Why was I listening to Andrew? Gradually, I began to think for myself again. And realized that it would be difficult to continue married life with Andrew as it was. That's when Andrew came to the hospital with Sarah. Andrew thought he could still control me, but by that time, I was fully awake. Yet, I decided to pretend to be under his control a little longer. And quietly turned on the recording function on my smartphone under the blanket. Currently, my smartphone contains evidence that Andrew forged the divorce papers. This surely constitutes a crime. Upon investigation, I discovered it qualifies as forgery of a sealed private document, punishable by imprisonment from 3 months to 5 years. Often you hear imprisonment or a fine of significant amount. But there is no fine for this crime, only imprisonment. This implies that, unless given a suspended sentence, one must serve time in prison. It feels like a particularly serious offense when only imprisonment is the option. So, Andrew did that much to me. There's no reason to hold back against such a villain. I made a call to someone from the smartphone in my hand. I was discharged from the hospital 5 days after Andrew's visit. But I didn't return to the house where I had lived with him. I had lived in that house for 2 years, the first 6 months were happy. But then Andrew gradually changed and became a tyrant by the end of the year. It was probably around the time he met Sarah. What I don't understand is, if he wanted to divorce me and marry Sarah, why did he need to manipulate me? What was Andrew's goal in doing all that? But now, rather than pondering this, I have something else to do. Having regained my mental and physical health, I have decided to get my revenge. 2 days after my discharge, which was 7 days after Andrew and Sarah visited the hospital, Andrew called as I expected. "Jenny? I'm glad you picked up. Where are you? Why haven't you come home?" I was appalled at how shamelessly he could say such things. I was speechless. "Who is this? Stop joking around. It's me, Andrew, your husband." I don't have a husband. If Andrew filed the divorce papers and married Sarah, he is now her husband, not mine. Didn't you divorce me and remarry Sarah? Then you are her husband and no longer have anything to do with me. It's okay, I'll divorce her and remarry you, so don't worry about anything. No one is worried about that, I was merely stating a fact. I'm not worried at all. I have no intention of remarrying you. Please be happy with Sarah. It's a misunderstanding. You're the only one I love, believe me. While saying this, Andrew started crying over the phone. Did he think that crying would move my heart? I was being threatened. Sarah is the daughter of the president of our company. They said they'd fire me if I didn't date her. I was just going along with it reluctantly, believe me. Andrew continued to plead through his tears. Was the forgery of the divorce papers also ordered by Sarah? Yes. She said she'd make you suffer if I didn't do it. I intend to sue you for forgery of a sealed private document. Upon hearing he would be sued, Andrew stopped crying and fell silent. By the way, it's time to renew the lease on that house. I won't be renewing it. It's good timing to switch everything, house, marriage, and affection, nothing wasted. Wait. I love you, listen to me. Unfortunately, our company won't be able to assist you in finding a new home. Please use another company. Goodbye. I ignored Andrew's crying and hung up the phone, then blocked his number. The reason Andrew was so desperate to contact me was because he learned the truth. Perhaps he saw a newspaper article or a TV news report this morning about my parents. The presidents of Thompson Home remarry. My parents, who had divorced when I was young, had remarried. Seeing a photo of me with them, Andrew must have realized that I am the daughter of the president of Thompson Home. My father, or rather, his ancestors were large landowners. And Thompson Home was started based on the real estate they owned. Even today, our company, Thompson Home, manages numerous houses and buildings across the U.S. I work at one of its branches. Our parents didn't divorce out of hatred for each other. My mother, skilled with her hands, started making jewelry as a hobby, which became popular and turned into a business. This upset my paternal grandmother, who owned Thompson Home. My grandfather had married into the family, and together with my grandmother, they had built up the company. My grandmother wanted my mother to help elevate the company alongside my father. Therefore, as my mother's brand grew, their relationship naturally deteriorated. After various issues, my parents decided to divorce. To simply say that marriage involves just two people would be an understatement. Thompson Home is too big a company, and my mother cherishes her own brand. They decided to divorce to prevent further strain on the family relationships that could affect the company's management. My mother took me with her when she left the house, but my grandmother allowed it. Perhaps she wanted my father to remarry and have a child who could be the heir. But my father never remarried despite her insistence. My mother felt the same. They continued to care for each other even after their separation. That's why my mother continued to use the Thompson name even after the divorce. And it was my surname before I married Andrew. Now that I'm divorced, I've returned to being a Thompson. Although relations with my mother were strained, my grandmother respected her character and skills, and she cared for me as her son's child. She was a very fair and generous person. But when it came to the wealth and company that had been passed down through generations, she couldn't accept my mother starting her own business. She wanted the entire family to be united and continue to protect Thompson home. My father wanted me to work with them, too, if I didn't mind. So I joined the company under the condition that I would be just another employee. So, very few people know that I am the daughter of the president. My grandmother knew, but she never particularly mentioned it. I kept my personal life and business completely separate. But my father secretly told me that my grandmother was pleased. I was learning the real estate business. This time, my critical condition had something to do with my parents' divorce. And it seems to have made my grandmother think. And so, my grandmother came to my mother, apologizing for her stubbornness all these years. This led to my parents remarrying after 25 years apart. Such an intriguing story couldn't possibly go unnoticed by the media. My mother, who visited me in the hospital, told me about it. And I asked to join her in taking interviews. Of course, my grandmother was delighted to agree. Major newspapers, television, and magazines came to cover the story. And I was featured prominently as well. Naturally, I thought Andrew would notice. Indeed, he found out that I am the daughter of a wealthy landowner and the president of Thompson Home. His frantic, tearful phone call came when he realized what he had missed out on. I sued Andrew for forging the divorce papers. His lawyer sought a settlement, but I refused, and as a result, Andrew was prosecuted and found guilty with a suspended sentence. I also demanded compensation from Sarah, who knew about Andrew's forgery, and sued her as an accomplice. Her lawyer sought a settlement too, but I refused, and she received a lighter, but still suspended, sentence. It turned out that Sarah and Andrew met at the company's founding party. Sarah fell for Andrew at first sight, despite knowing he was married, and insisted on marrying him. Initially, Andrew was troubled by the fact that Sarah was 10 years his senior and not his type. But he couldn't refuse the president's daughter, and their relationship deepened over time. The president, unable to marry off his daughter Sarah, turned a blind eye. He thought if Andrew would take his daughter off his hands, a little money given to Andrew's wife would solve any problems. Andrew confessed that he initially mistreated me because he felt guilty for making me do nearly all the housework despite earning less. By speaking ill of Jenny, I wanted to feel justified in my actions. It made me happy to be pampered by her. I was being childish. Looking back, I regret acting like a child. Even if that were his true feelings. The fact that he deeply hurt me and pushed me to lose all hope is undeniable. Perhaps initially motivated by his neediness, Andrew, after meeting Sarah, might have thought he could divorce me if I fell ill. When I got sick, he hastily filed the forged divorce papers and married Sarah, thinking that creating a fait accompli would make me accept the situation without resistance. If his affair with Sarah came to light, he would be at fault in the divorce. He planned to make it seem like my fault, treating me like a servant at home, while stringing Sarah along until an opportunity arose. Andrew pleaded to his lawyer, "I never intended to leave Jenny." But Sarah was so persistent I couldn't break it off. The only person I truly love is Jenny. I was just waiting for Sarah to give up. But of course, that was not taken seriously. Sarah's father, furious, divorced her from Andrew. Subsequently, Andrew was dismissed from his job and now works live-in at a new company. Toiling from early morning till late night to pay the compensation I was awarded. Sarah's father didn't demand compensation from Andrew, partly because Sarah was complicit, but also to prioritize the payments to me. Honestly, I didn't care about the money. But I wanted them to atone for their actions. That's why I refused any settlement offer from Sarah's father, no matter how much he pleaded. Sarah's father, saying he would no longer let her be free, came to apologize and asked me to settle things quietly. But understanding my firm stance, he finally accepted it. Sarah is now under strict family surveillance, being sternly re-educated from scratch. Sometimes, I can't help but think that if Sarah had not fallen for Andrew, none of this would have happened. However, considering she persistently pursued Andrew despite knowing he was married, her guilt is not insignificant. Andrew should have clearly maintained his marital fidelity and rejected Sarah's advances. But he did not. Dreaming of marrying a president's daughter and trapping his wife in that situation is an unforgivable crime. What happens to them now is no longer my concern. As long as they never appear before me again. My parents remarried, and as the heir and president's daughter, I've begun to study anew. While I have learned quite a bit about real estate as an employee, managing a business is different. I must study much more about business management. I stubbornly thought that I did not want to divorce like my parents, and that led to such a situation. It was due to my own weakness. If I had been more assertive and faced Andrew properly, perhaps I would not have ended up like this. Maybe we would still be a happy couple. It pains my heart to think about it because I truly loved him. He was someone I seriously loved and married. To have turned such a person into a criminal makes me feel as if I bear a heavy guilt. When I shared these thoughts, both my mother and grandmother told me I was wrong. You mustn't blame yourself. You didn't hurt anyone. That's very important. They committed those crimes entirely of their own volition. Your mother is right. If there is any guilt, it lies with me for not accepting your mother, for making you timid. Now reconciled and close, my mother and grandmother comforted me. Blaming myself was also blaming them, I realized. Humans. Era. What matters is what we do when we era. A lesson I've learned. Whether or not someone like Andrew, whom I can love again, comes along, I don't know. When that time comes, I will make sure not to repeat my mistakes. A life where I never love again because of one failure would be lonely. Even if I never meet such a person, I want to walk through life upright and confident on my own. I am just starting to take those steps. I have sworn to myself to live a happy life.